Hello and welcome to the Week 7 edition of Around the Valley. I'm Arshir. I'm joined as always by Kenny Hodges and Kaylie Arshir, and I'm just excited. This Week 7 slate that we're going to go over was insane, to say the least. I'm not going to waste any more time on all this. Kenny, how's it going?
Man, I am doing great. You know what? We've been doing this for 2.5 years. I just realized that me and Kaylee got the same initials. That's wild. But anyway, we are looking at Week 7, a great week of football, great week of action we just put in the books. Man, we had some controversy. We had a nail biter where a team had to pull it out at the end. And all in all these league titles are still up for grabs in one way or another. But without any further ado, let's jump right in. We'll start in the West Valley, going through the scores. Granada Hills bounced back with a good win, 40-21 over Taft. Granada Hills punched them in the mouth right away, scored all 40 of their points in the first half, and they cruised to a victory over at Cleveland. Chatsworth put up a good fight. They bounced back from a tough previous week, just couldn't hold on at the end. Cleveland gutted a tough win out, down 14-6 in the fourth quarter. Two late scores to pull that game out 20-14. And over at El Camino, Birmingham doing what Birmingham has done to everybody in the city. Another week, another dominating performance in the West Valley as they beat El Camino 57-7. Birmingham has outscored their first two West Valley opponents 121-7 in 2 weeks. Yikes. That team looks like they are going to be tough to deal with down the stretch. So looking at the West Valley standings, Birmingham and Cleveland are both at 2-0 at the top of the league. Granada Hills and Elko are behind them at 1-1 apiece. Taft and Chatsworth are bringing up the rear. They're 0-2 in the league. So looking at some of the headlines coming out of the West Valley this week, Birmingham puts up another dominating performance. It's become sort of passé at this point. Cleveland shows grit, pulling out a close one over Chatsworth. They got a big one looming this week. Granada Hills rebounds with a dominant win over Taft. So I'll start with you, Kaylee. Good evening here. And I'll ask you, out of those things that we've seen out of the West Valley, what's the thing that has stuck out the most to you coming out of Week 7?
Well, I will say I don't necessarily think that in the Valley, yes, Birmingham's dominance is it's redundant to say the least. I mean, we know it's going to happen that way, and so that's not shocking at all. However, I think it is going to energize them a little bit more as they continue through their league play. The stark difference between how their performance was before they started playing in the league and how dominant they've been since they've started. So hopefully that momentum continues and, we get another league and city title out of them. However, I was surprised at how much of a fight Chatsworth was able to put up against Cleveland. I think in my brain, I kind of set Cleveland as a little bit apart from the rest of the West Valley just because they have shown a lot of dominance this season early on as well. And so to see them struggle a little bit and kind of have to work for it, that was, I think, the most surprising.
So let me ask you this, Arshir. So to piggyback off of Kaylie's point, I think is a good starting point there. We did sort of kind of look at Cleveland and sort of separating themselves from the rest of the pack in the West Valley. We knew Granada might, feel a little bit different, having lost some of the star power they lost in previous years. They're still a decent team. They're still a good team. That veer is still killing everybody. But when you look at what Birmingham has done those first two games, and I'll ask you this too, Kaylee, when we come back to you. But Arshir, I'll ask you first. Do you have faith that Cleveland or Granada will be able to kind of stay with Birmingham? Because to Kaylee's point, you would probably feel a little bit better about it if Cleveland had come out and kind of smacked Chatsworth the way we saw Birmingham do. But the fact that they had to kind of battle and pull that game out at the end, does that make the confidence waver that Cleveland can kind of hang with Birmingham or Granada when they face them in the coming weeks?
I think Granada is going to struggle in that sense. They're young. and I'll get more into that when we cover the game against Taft. But for Cleveland, I think we're undervaluing maybe Chatsworth's ability on defense a little bit. Street likes to have his defense, especially in the trenches. We've seen how they lift and how strong these boys are and how much they fight. So we might be undervaluing that defense a little bit. But that being said, if Chatsworth was going to show that they are in a tier above the rest of the West Valley that's not Birmingham, I'll put it that way. They didn't really show it. They pulled out the win, which is great for them. But yeah, I think no one has really shown us that they're ready to step up to that level. But it doesn't mean they can't, right? Any given Friday.
Okay, so I think in terms of how we typically rank the West Valley, we're usually putting Birmingham, Cleveland, and Granada in the top 3 spots the majority of the time. And I think because Birmingham still has Cleveland and Granada, which, again, Granada is not, they are a young team. They're not the Granada that we've seen the last few years. So, you can't set your expectations too high. But because Birmingham still has Granada and Cleveland left on their schedule, I think it's hard to say exactly how that's going to pan out or how well to say how well that Granada or Cleveland is going to be able to hang with them because they haven't had that matchup yet. Going into the season or within the first few weeks of the season, I definitely thought that Cleveland was going to be the team to be the challenge for Birmingham in the West Valley. Not to prequel too much, but I'm really excited for that game this week. However, I think Granada's got some building to do. I think that their focus shouldn't be on trying to beat Birmingham this year like it has been in previous years. So I think that the team that Birmingham really needs to look out for, and I think probably the toughest game of league play is going to be this weekend. Do I think that Cleveland's going to come out victorious? Would be interesting to see. Wouldn't put my money on it.
Yeah, but it's been an interesting first couple of weeks in the West Valley. Birmingham looks dominant. Other teams are sort of kind of figuring out, but like I'll say every week, you got to roll the balls out and play the game. So you just never know. But we'll leave the West Valley conversation there. We'll move on to the Valley Mission. We had some interesting things happen in this league this week, starting with the scores. Sylmar, controversial ending to a really, really fabulous game between Sylmar and San Fernando. Sylmar takes the game 23-22 with a field goal in the final seconds. There's some conversations that are being had on the San Fernando side about time and the clock situation sort of at the end of the game. But nevertheless, goes down officially in the books as a Sylmar victory, 23-22. Moving over to Canoga Park, Kennedy goes on the road, does what they do. 50-8 final. Diego Montes accounts for 5 touchdowns in Kennedy's blowout win as he continues to strengthen his claims on being one of the city section players of the year. Panorama went on the road to Jordan. Jordan's run game did a number on him, over 400 yards on the ground for Jordan as they take care of Panorama 44-32. And the other game in the Valley Mission this week was Van Nuys shutting out Reseda 38-0. The Wolves had 5 TD passes, continuing the trend that we've seen with a hot offense, airing the ball out all over the place. So looking at the standings as they currently sit, Sylmar sitting at the top of the league at 4-0. Kennedy right there with them at 3-0. Big clash between those two teams coming up. Panorama and Van Nuys are sitting at 2-1 in the league. San Fernando, surprisingly, is sitting at 1-3, 3-5 overall. Canoga Park and Reseda still looking for their first wins in the Valley Mission this season. So, taking a look at the headlines coming out of Valley Mission Week 7. Sylmar wins a controversial rivalry game. Kennedy continues to dominate in the Valley Mission. Panorama has a slip up at Jordan, even though they had been playing a lot better recently. and Van Nuys moves to 2-1 in the Valley Mission. So we don't got to delve too much into the Van Nuys or the Kennedy game of against Canoga, because we know they were playing against a couple of the teams that are sort of kind of struggling to figure things out. Panorama, we know we talked about this year about them being up and down, but obviously the talking point coming out of this week, like we had talked about last week, was Sylmar and their prospects in the Valley Mission. We needed to see if they could beat San Fernando to kind of set up a monster, a gargantuan matchup this week against Kennedy, with it all on the line in terms of who's going to be in the pole position for the Valley Mission title. And I'll ask you guys flat out, with what we saw this weekend, obviously San Fernando definitely feels like they might have gotten robbed in that game. But nonetheless, it was a back and forth. It was a great battle between those two teams. Sylmar absolutely showed that they had the toughness in the heart to win a close game that way. And I'll ask you guys, I'll start with you this time, Arshir. Sylmar sitting at 4-0. We all know Kennedy is the favorite. They're going to go play Kennedy next week. Can Sylmar beat Kennedy flat out?
And this is a big if, and this is taking nothing away from Sylmar. If Kennedy isn't ready to play, Sylmar will beat him. If Kennedy is ready to play, which we expect them to be because Troy Cassidy always has his boys ready on Friday nights, I don't think they blow him out. I think it's a closer game than most of what they've played this season. I still think Kennedy comes out on top. I don't believe Sylmar has seen a quarterback as dynamic as Diego Montez this season. I don't think they've seen an offense that is humming the way the Kennedy offense is humming so far this season. So those two things are probably what tips the scale for me. And it's nothing against Sylmar. It's one thing when you know who they are and you've seen it on tape. It's another when you faced it or something very similar already. And I haven't seen a team that is at that level yet.
I mean, no disrespect to Sylmar, but Kennedy's on a roll. They've been on a roll. I don't think that even a couple hiccups or, things not necessarily swaying their way. I think that they're dominant enough as a team that even if they're not 100%, they would still beat Sylmar.
Yeah, I can't say that I disagree with either of you guys. I think for me, it's all going to be about tempo. If Sylmar can control that game, they've got a chance. They have to get that game into the fourth quarter within a score, because then the rules can kind of go out the window, and you never know what can happen. You can force a turnover, somebody coughs up a ball, something happens. But if you come out in that game, especially what we've seen Kennedy do this year, and you allow Diego Montez in that offense to turn it into a track meet, it could be a long game for Sylmar.
I have to expand on that Sylmar San Fernando game real quick. It was almost a repeat and reversal of what happened last year. Game came down to the very, very end, the final seconds, one-score game. And the sideline official on the Sylmar side, on their final drive, informed Coach Williams that they had 2 timeouts left at the moment, when all the other officials had it that Sylmar only had 1. So on that final drive where they kicked the field goal, they used the 2 timeouts that they were told they had. And this is where some of that controversy starts to brew of, wait, why did they get 4 timeouts? The side judge told them, and that's the one who called the timeout, and they were going by what the official said. So even after conferring with the other referees, one thing I've learned in high school, also in high school sports, period, is officials are not going to overturn a judgment call made by another official. Even in the case where 4 out of 5 have it one way and the other one made that call. That's where we stand. It was hard. San Fernando did have a chance. They moved the ball down the field really quickly in the final 15 seconds, but the interception ended it. I'll just leave it there, though. It was heartbreaking. If you're San Fernando, it's exhilarating if you're Silmar. It went the other way last year. So that's where we are.
Yeah, if you saw that game, you kind of left wondering, like, man, if they had 10 more seconds, could they have gotten themselves in position to kind of snatch that game away? But, the breaks are what they are. Silmar remains unbeaten in the Valley Mission, and they've got a big one coming up this weekend. So, moving to the East Valley, we had some interesting games kind of go down this week. That the East Valley is still in play, even though the top dog sitting at the top is unbeaten and looking like they want to stay that way. But there's a team there that could shake up, could rattle the cage a little bit, and maybe not so fast on the East Valley being completely wrapped up. So let's start with the scores. Our leader hosted Fulton. Mustang defense shut out Fulton the final 3 quarters. They came away with a 20-6 victory. Grant went on the road to Monroe. Isaac Castaneda had a big night. Had a rushing touchdown, receiving touchdown, and an interception return for a touchdown, and a cruising victory for Grant on the road at Monroe. NoHo, as much as we talked about Chavez maybe being able to kind of make it a fist fight, if it was a fist fight, and then they went about 2 rounds before the referee came in and checking on the cuts. So NoHo went on to beat Chavez 45-14. No Omar Muhammad, no problem in this game. Jagger Belson stepped right in, 221 yards rushing and 4 touchdowns on the ground in NoHo's win. And last but not least, Verdugo Hills with a tough, gritty win over a game Poly team, 17-14. The Dons moved to 3-1 in the East Valley with the title still in their sight. So just looking at the standings, NoHo sits at the top at 4-0, 7-0 overall. Our leaders and Verdugo right behind them at 3-1 each. Poly, Chavez, and Grant all at 2-2. Fulton and Monroe still looking for their first wins in the East Valley. So headlines coming out of the East Valley in week 7. Our leader dominates their 3rd straight win in league play. Look like they've kind of shaken off the ugliness that was that NoHo stomping they went through. And they look like they're back to their normal selves with an eye on the postseason, making some moves there. Grant breaks out of their offensive slump that they had been in for the last couple of weeks. Monroe is the home cooking that a lot of teams have sort of kind of gotten healthy on this year. NoHo keeps rolling. They remain the only unbeaten team in the entirety of the city section. You heard me right. The entire city section, NoHo is the only team that is undefeated. And then Verdugo keeps their league title hopes alive with a gritty win. So, looking at how the league is sort of shaping up now. We're 4 weeks in the East Valley play. We kind of know what our NoHo is. We kind of know what our leader is, but our leader already lost to NoHo, so they would need some miraculous things to sort of happen for them to still win the league outright, right? So Verdugo was the team that sort of kind of you look at now and you say, if there's the only team outside of NoHo that sort of controls their own destiny to be the East Valley champ, it's Sean Jackson's bunch at Verdugo Hills. So I'll flat out ask you guys, with what they have left on their schedule, at Grant, home game against Chavez, before that November 1st game at NoHo, will Verdugo Hills be 5-1 in this league when they go to play NoHo on November 1st?
I think it's definitely a possibility. I think, aside from that NoHo game, which leading up to that, I think they have a good shot of winning both those games and putting up a really fair matchup against NoHo. North Hollywood is my favorite team in this league, so I would be excited to see them with a bit of a challenge, especially for the final game of the league play. That's awesome.
So I ask you, Usher, so looking at what they got left, right? They got to go on the road to Grant next week. We know that Grant offense, when they show up, when they decide to look the part of a dangerous offense, they can make your life miserable the way they throw the ball all over the place and spread you out and all that stuff that comes with the silly offense. The screaming, yelling on the sideline, but also a lot of points. That's what you get from Grant on a good night. But then you also got Chavez, who is a professional mess maker. They try to make games muddy. They want to drag you into a fourth quarter where the score is 6-0, 8-3. That's where they want to get you, and then try to snatch a game away from you against the better teams. So with those two landmines, with them also knowing that NoHo is in sight, do you think this team takes care of those next two games and gets to 5-1, or do you think they're going to have a pitfall in one of these next 2 weeks?
Ever since Sean Jackson took full hands-on control of how his team is running this season, they've met all expectations. Outside of a Arleta game where honestly it was just a couple of breaks in the first half, and this is a completely different game. So knowing that he has taken things to a certain extent, I can't see the team underperforming like they have in the past. I mean, Verdugo has notoriously started off in a way where we look at them, and this is like the last 4 or 5 years, where we would look at them and say, well, you know what, maybe this might be the year where they actually make a lot of noise. And then we get to this point, right? Week 6, 7, and Verdugo's starting to tail off. I don't see that this season. I'll start to wrap this up. If Grant is firing on all cylinders, Verdugo will need to have some statement plays if they want to get past Grant. They're not beyond it. And then Chavez, look, this Pauly game proved that Verdugo will do okay in a slugfest. Get in the trenches and figure out a way to make something happen. So, enough having it on, I'm going to say yes.
Man, I think I'm there as well. I think they'll win the next 2 games. It's just this game this week, man, it scares me, because having watched Grant a few times this year, that offense, when it's going right, they take advantage of any and all mental mistakes you make, especially on the back end. The minute you blow a coverage, that quarterback has an arm to get the ball to open receivers, and those receivers don't drop balls. And he's got 3 guys on his offense, that in Cecilia's offense, that can catch a 5-yard slant and take it to the crib if they need to. So that's the game to me. I don't think Chavez has enough offense to beat him, but this is the game where I'm like, man, just don't allow yourself to end up in a situation where Grant gets up on you 14 points and then you got to go try to chase him down, because I don't think that works out well for Verdugo. But I have faith in Coach Jackson. I think he'll have the boys ready to play, because for us, for everybody's sake, for us covering it, for people who love Valley football, it would be really fun to get to November 1st, to get to that last week of the regular season, and we still have a juicy matchup that means a lot in terms of not just for the league, but also could very much determine where both of those teams kind of sit when playoffs come. That could be a game that kind of launches NoHo into we'll talk about that in a couple of weeks, a precarious potentially position come playoff time. But it would also be great for Verdugo to put themselves in a situation come playoff time, having a couple weeks of home games, depending on where you kind of sit, finishing strong with a 8-2 finish to the season. They'll put themselves in great position to have a strong postseason run. So I think they'll do it. I think they'll be 5-1 when they get there.
The one thing before we move on, the one thing that can happen is that game can't be a track meet. It can't be a shootout.
Yeah.
Because like you said, Stacili's boys are designed for that kind of game. If both teams are throwing the ball like crazy, then it's different. The team that controls the pace is the team that's going to win.
Yeah, I agree. So that sort of wraps up week 6. To show some love to our teams in the southern section before we move on to looking ahead, just to run through the scores of games that happened on the southern section side for our Valley teams or Valley adjacent teams. Sierra Canyon handles business on the road at Notre Dame, 50-17. Both teams are 4-3 in a tight Mission League. Chaminade drops a game at home to Sarah. They fall to 1-6. Alemany loses their second game in a row as they lose at home to St. Francis, 37-13. Burbank with a big win over winless Hoover, 61-22 as they move to 5-2. Burroughs falls to 5-2 with a big loss at home to Muir, 50-6. Calabasas drops game at home to Newberry Park, 48-20 as they fall to 4-3. Salesian hosted Crespi. They shut them out 38-zip as Crespi falls to 3-4. Village getting hot at the right time. They moved to 2-0 in their league as they go to Capistrano Valley and hang 64 on those boys, 64-22. Heritage is still reeling a bit from the Bible Bowl. They lose their second in a row. They fall to 0-2 in their league in the league as they lose a tough one at home, 28-21 to Ontario. And last but not least, Crescenta Valley moves to 4-3 with a good win at home over Pasadena, 28-6. So let's look ahead to week 8. We have some juicy matchups, as we've kind of alluded to. When you look at the slate, I'll run down the slate of week 8 games. Cleveland is at Birmingham. Chatsworth's at Taft. Granada's on the road at El Camino. In the Valley Mission, you've got the big matchup between Sylmar and Kennedy. Canoga's at Van Nuys. Panorama is traveling to San Fernando. No doubt angry San Fernando coming out of last week. And in the East Valley, you've got Verdugo at Grant, as we just kind of talked about a bit. Fulton is on the road at NoHo. Good luck to them. And Monroe is on the road at Chavez. So I'll ask you both. Obviously, we talked about some of the juicier matchups. We all might land a different place on what we think is can't miss. So I'll ask you guys for the win. We're going through those slate of games. Kaylie, we'll start with you. Give me one game that you look at on that schedule and you're like, this is a can't miss game. This is game of the week caliber, just because of the star power that's in the matchup. And then I'll ask you for a game that's under the radar to you, a game that you think might be sneaky good out of those games in the Valley. What do you got?
Well, I kind of already alluded to this in my previous answers. I'm most excited for that Cleveland-Birmingham game, and I think my sneaker, like, if I could be two places at once, I would also really like to see the Verdugo Grant game.
Yeah, those are good choices. All right, Arshavir, what you got? Give me your can't miss game and give me your under the radar game this week.
As exciting as it is to get into the West Valley, for me, the can't miss is Verdugo Grant. Only because I think the weight of the implications are a little more, just a little bit, as opposed to the Birmingham Cleveland. And my sleeper is Panorama San Fernando, because Panorama has moments where they're starting to put it together, and San Fernando is going to be angry. So do we have a composed team taking care of an angry team, or does the angry team take it all out and beat them all up? It's worth the watch for me.
Yeah, those are good choices. Obviously for me, where I land on for can't miss is going to be Sylmar Kennedy, just because the stakes are very high, and you just never know what can happen when everything's on the line. Who knows? Maybe Kennedy comes out a little nervous. I doubt it, but you just never know. We've seen games with Kennedy and Sylmar in the past where a fumble here, an interception here sort of kind of turns the game on its head. It'd be interesting to see if Silmar can kind of put that control, that tempo, that pace, and not let Diego get out of hand like he tends to do sometimes when he gets hot early in games. Can they kind of slow it down? Can they kind of muck up the game? It's just going to be interesting. It's a styles clash between those two teams, and you never know. There could be some fireworks. But here's the game that I'm going to when I say a sneaky game that we could be talking about a lot coming out of week 8 because of the significance for both programs, and also just coming out of what we saw in the Cleveland game. You just never know what you're going to get from Granada from one half to the next. This game against Elko is huge. It's a huge game for a couple of reasons. One, Granada really sort of needs the game to sort of put themselves in a position to kind of jump back into the top half of D1. This team is too good and too talented to slide to D2. But a win here against Elko could really, really help their cause, because one of the things, if you notice about Granada, despite the fact that their record is at 2-5 overall, the reason why they're not sliding as much in the rankings is because no team in the entirety of the city section has played a tougher. I don't care what the numbers say. I don't care what the computers say. There's only one team in the city section that can say every game except for one, the game they played this past week against Tab. Every other game they've played this year has been against a top 20 opponent in the city. No one else can say they played a schedule like that. This team has played tough game after tough game after tough game. And yes, they've come out on the losing end, but if they can beat Elko and put that notch in the belt, another team that's a top 25 team, all of a sudden that team puts themselves back in the conversation for a top 8 seed in D1. They obviously won't go open this year with as many losses as they have, but this is still a team. If they can get their first game or first 2 games at home in the playoffs, they could easily find themselves in the semis, because this team is annoying to try to defend just based on their levels of annoyance and trying to stop that damn veer. They could find themselves in position for a deep postseason run, but it would start with winning a game against Elko. Plus, on the other side of it is Elko. Let's throw out the Birmingham game. Like I said, this is what happens. We saw what happened to Chatsworth. You get punched in the mouth, forget it. You're trying to chase this Birmingham team. Now Eddie Plaza is running around scaring the hell out of everybody. You're not. There's nothing you're gonna do. Just forget it. He starts flexing his muscles. You forget how to play football. Forget it. Let's just throw that baby out with the bathwater last week. Elko is going to be hungry. They're going to want to look to prove that last week was an aberration. They look more like the team from the previous 2 weeks before the Birmingham game. And I think that this game could be one of those where we look back and they just going up and down the field, and it could be a shootout. So that's my sneaky game of the week.
Now, one note on that as you were talking. I realized I didn't mention it earlier like I wanted to. Granada Hills is doing all of this that they've done, starting 6 sophomores.
Yep.
Starting 6 sophomores, not in the rotation. They have 6 sophomores that are playing significant minutes for them. Yeah. So that's another thing to keep an eye on with this matchup. And hey, look, they're not kids anymore. I mean, they're kids, but now they're battle tested.
Yep. Absolutely. And you're going against an Elko team that they're the opposite. They had some seniors that kind of had to figure out how to pick up the ball after post Jake Shirley. And we started to see Jaden Williams. We started to see Acevedo. We started to see some of these kids really start to come around and really kind of change that season. So this is a game for both of these teams looking at it. And they're going to be like, hey, we really need this. We need to win this. This will change the way people sort of look at us and look at our chances going into postseason and how we feel about ourselves. So I expect these teams to go at it. I expect there to be some points. I expect it to come down to the wire. This feels like a game whoever has the ball last could win it. So I think that could be the sneaky game. So that's where I land with that. So it's been another episode of Around the Valley, covering our prep football. we have some exciting things on the horizon as we are chugging along towards the postseason. Boy, it has felt like this season has gone in a flash. We're already 8 weeks in, headed down the final stretch of the season, but there's still a lot more football to come, especially when you look at the fact that we got a lot of good teams in the Valley. So that means we're going to have a lot of damn teams all throughout these brackets when we get to the postseason because of how good the football has been in our neck of the woods. So for Arshir Sarian, and for Kaylie Arshir, I'm your boy Kenny Hodges, and also leave a like. We see that y'all watching, y'all coming and y'all paying attention. Leave us a like and subscribe. And hit the notification bell so you know when these are live, because I see y'all. We watching the analytics. We know y'all curious because you know how good this stuff is. So leave a like, leave a comment. We read them, subscribe, and keep on tuning in, man. Keep tuning in and go to Valley Sports Telegram. We got so much content there. We got writers who are on the scene. We're covering all this stuff. And now we're getting into the volleyball too. We putting y'all on for what y'all need to be watching as we head towards the volleyball playoffs as well. So keep tuning in, folks. We're going to keep bringing y'all this action. So for us here at Valley Sports Telegram, this has been another episode of Around the Valley. Check y'all next time. Peace.
Peace.